He was the monster every server prayed they wouldn't get. Alistair Blackwood, a billionaire whose temper was more famous than his fortune. Staff at the Gilded Spoon would fake illnesses, drop trays, do anything to avoid his table. For years they tiptoed around the dragon, enduring his cold fury and impossible demands in terrified silence. They all knew the rules: never make eye contact, never speak unless spoken to, and never ever challenge him. Then a new waitress, Sophia Rossi, started her shift completely unaware of the legend. And when she looked the monster right in the eye and refused to break, she unknowingly lit a fuse that would expose a secret so devastating it would change everything. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a restaurant, it was a theater. Every night a performance of wealth and status played out under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Its patrons were the city's elite old money scions, tech moguls, and the politicians who courted them. Its staff were seasoned professionals, trained to be unobtrusive ghosts who anticipated every need before it was voiced. They moved with a synchronized silent grace, their faces placid masks of impeccable service. But on Tuesday evenings, a different kind of performance took place, a one-man show of intimidation, and the entire staff became its unwilling, trembling audience. Tuesday was Mr. Blackwood's night. Alistair Blackwood. The name was spoken in hushed tones in the kitchen, a verbal curse that seemed to cool the air. He was a titan of industry, a man who had built a global logistics empire from the ground up. His face, etched with severe lines and framed by steel-grey hair, often graced the covers of business magazines. But in the hushed, carpeted corridors of the Gilded Spoon, he wasn't a titan. He was a terror. Stories about him were the restaurant's own grim folklore. There was the tale of the sommelier he'd had fired on the spot for recommending a wine that was, in Blackwood's opinion, presumptuous. There was the young busboy who'd accidentally spilled a single drop of water on the tablecloth and was met with a glare so withering he'd quit mid-shift. The fear was primal. When his polished black Rolls-Royce would pull up to the curb, a wave of silent panic would ripple through the establishment. The host, Gregory, a man who'd once stared down a charging bull in Pamplona, would visibly pale. Senior waiters would suddenly find urgent tasks in the wine cellar. Junior staff would become intensely interested in polishing already gleaming silverware in the back. The unenviable task of serving him fell to whoever drew the short straw, a grim ritual overseen by the floor manager, Mr. Peterson. Into this den of carefully managed anxiety walked Sophia Rossi. Sophia was new. Not just to the Gilded Spoon, but to this level of dining. She was 24, with eyes the color of warm honey that held a fire of determination. Her life had been a series of hard knocks and sidesteps. She was working 2 jobs to put her younger sister Maya through community college, while also helping to manage the growing pile of medical bills for their mother, who was battling a chronic illness. For Sophia, this job wasn't about prestige, it was about survival. It paid better than any place she'd ever worked, and she was determined to excel to become one of those seamless professional ghosts. She'd spent her first week in a daze of learning, memorizing the dizzying wine list, the precise placement of 7 different forks, and the subtle social cues of the fabulously wealthy. She hadn't yet been indoctrinated into the cult of fear surrounding Alistair Blackwood. Her training had focused on menus and protocol, not the psychological profiles of problem patrons. On her second Tuesday, the short straw was metaphorically handed to her. The designated waiter for Blackwood's usual corner booth, a secluded alcove offering privacy and a panoramic view of the city, had called in sick with a sudden violent stomach flu that everyone knew was a diplomatic fiction. Mr. Peterson, his face tight with stress, scanned the floor. His eyes, desperate, landed on Sophia. She was polishing glasses behind the bar, her movements quick and efficient. "Rossi Peterson," said his voice, low and urgent. "You're up." "Up for what?" "Mr. Peterson," she asked, setting a crystal flute down with care. "Table 7. Mr. Blackwood." The name meant nothing to her. "Okay. Any allergies or preferences I should know about?" A nervous laugh escaped a nearby waiter, which he quickly stifled into a cough when Peterson shot him a death glare. "Just be perfect," Peterson whispered, his eyes wide. "Don't make conversation. Don't offer suggestions unless he asks. Your name is Waitress. Your opinion is none. Do you understand? Be quick, be quiet, be gone." The intensity of the warning was strange, but Sophia simply nodded. She'd dealt with difficult customers before. How bad could one man be? She straightened her black apron, took a deep breath, and grabbed a leather-bound menu. As she approached table 7, she felt the ambient energy of the dining room shift. It was as if 100 conversations had simultaneously lowered in volume. The other servers moved with a new stilted caution, their eyes darting towards her, then away like frightened birds. She could feel their collective gaze on her back, a heavy cloak of shared dread. He was already seated, staring out the vast window at the glittering city below. He didn't look up as she approached. He was a man built on a large, imposing scale, his bespoke navy suit fitting his broad shoulders perfectly. A half-empty glass of what looked like scotch sat by his hand. "Good evening, Sir," Sophia said, her voice clear and steady. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. May I present you with the menu?" Alistair Blackwood turned his head slowly. His eyes, a startlingly pale, icy blue, scanned her from head to toe. It wasn't a leer. It was an appraisal, cold and dismissive, as if he were inspecting a piece of furniture for flaws. He said nothing. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. Sophia held his gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. She'd been taught that direct eye contact was a sign of confidence and sincerity. Peterson's warning echoed in her head, but instinct took over. Cowering felt like a form of dishonesty. Finally, with a soft grunt, he gestured curtly at the table. "Leave it." Sophia placed the menu down. "Can I get you another scotch while you decide?" He picked up his glass, swirled the amber liquid, and took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're new," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. My 2nd week. They're letting novices handle this table now." He asked, a subtle, cutting disdain in his tone. Standards must be slipping. Sophia felt a flash of heat rise in her cheeks, but she suppressed it. She thought of her mother's prescription costs. She thought of Maya's tuition payment due next month. She could not afford to fail. "I'm fully trained on the menu, sir," she replied, her tone even and professional. "And I can assure you, the only thing slipping will be the butter on your complimentary bread roll should you desire one." The silence that followed was absolute. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought she'd be fired on the spot. She could feel Peterson's horror from across the room without even looking. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Brenda, a veteran waitress, press a hand to her mouth. Blackwood's severe face didn't change, but a flicker of something surprise annoyance passed through his cold eyes. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out another low grunt, this one sounding less like a dismissal and more like a reluctant acknowledgement. "Filet mignon. Medium rare. More rare than medium. If it comes out even a hint of pink in the center, I'm sending it back. The sauce on the side. Not drizzled, not in a little puddle next to it. In a separate bowl. And a bottle of the 82 Petrus." He didn't even glance at the wine list. He knew what he wanted. He knew it was one of the most expensive and rare bottles they had. It was a power move, a test, an excellent choice. Sir Sophia said, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. She wrote down the order, her hand steady. I'll put that in immediately." She turned and walked away, her back straight, her steps measured. She didn't run. She didn't look relieved. She moved with the same professional grace as she had on her approach. As she passed the bar, Brenda grabbed her arm, her eyes wide, with a mixture of terror and awe. "Are you insane?" Brenda hissed. "You talked back to him." "Nobody talks back to him." "I didn't talk back," Sophia corrected quietly, pulling her arm free. "I did my job. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go and make sure the chef understands the concept of more rare than medium." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving a trail of stunned silence in her wake. The staff of the Gilded Spoon had just witnessed the unthinkable. A new waitress had stood her ground against Alistair Blackwood. And for the first time in a very long time, no one knew what was going to happen next. The script had been thrown out, and the theatre of the Gilded Spoon had suddenly become very real. The kitchen was a pressure cooker of controlled chaos. But when Sophia pushed through the swinging doors, the usual clatter of pans and shouted orders seemed to momentarily hush. The head chef, Antoine, a temperamental genius who feared no man, except it seemed the one at table 7, looked up from plating a delicate sea bass. The order for Blackwood Sophia announced, handing him the slip. She leaned in closer. "Chef, he was very specific about the steak. He said medium rare, but more rare than medium. He also said he'd send it back if it's even a hint of pink." Antoine snatched the paper, his brow furrowed. "More rare than medium, but not pink. Does he want me to cook it with a stern look?" "What is this nonsense? And the sauce a separate bowl completely detached from the plate," Sophia added. Antoine grumbled, running a hand through his flour-dusted hair. This man. Every week a new psychological game. "Fine. I will sear it for 45 seconds on each side and wave it in the general direction of the oven. If he complains, you tell him it was cooked with quantum mechanics." He then barked at a line cook, "Get the Petrus from the deep cellar and handle it like it's a newborn baby's heart." Sophia retreated from the kitchen's heat, her mission accomplished. But as she stepped back into the dining room, she found herself the epicenter of a storm of whispers. The other servers now looked at her differently. Before, she was the quiet new girl. Now she was a curiosity, a daredevil who had poked the dragon and somehow not been incinerated. Brenda intercepted her again, this time pulling her into the small, cramped staff locker room in the back. Mr. Peterson was there too, pacing the tiny space like a caged animal. He had loosened his tie, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. Rossi closed the door. Peterson commanded, his voice strained. Sophia did as she was told, the click of the latch sounding loud in the tense room. "What in God's name were you thinking?" Peterson began, stopping his pacing to face her. "I told you. Be quiet. Be invisible. The only thing slipping will be the butter on your complimentary bread roll. Are you trying to get fired?" He was being rude. "Mr. Peterson," Sophia said, her own defensiveness rising. "He implied I was incompetent and that your standards were dropping. I simply corrected him politely." Politely, Brenda cut in, her arms crossed. "Sophia, you don't understand. This isn't a normal customer. This is Alistair Blackwood. He doesn't operate on a normal human level. He doesn't do polite. He does power. He's a shark. You don't correct a shark. You just hope it doesn't bite you." Peterson sank onto a small bench, rubbing his temples. "Brenda's right. Let me give you the full picture since you seem to have missed the memo. 2 years ago, Blackwood came in. A young waiter, Thomas, a good kid, was serving him. Blackwood claimed his soup was cold. It wasn't. Thomas, trying to be helpful, said, "I can assure you, sir, it came right from the pot." A simple, innocent sentence. Peterson looked up, his eyes grave. Blackwood made one phone call. The next day, Thomas's father, a department manager at a mid-level supply company, was laid off. The company had just lost its biggest contract, a subsidiary of Blackwood Industries. We never proved it, of course. But we all knew. The man is vindictive. He is cruel. He has the power to ruin lives over a bowl of soup. Sophia felt a chill go down her spine. This was more than just a grumpy rich man. This was something darker, more malevolent. Why, Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why is he like that? Brenda sighed, her hardened expression softening for a moment. The story goes. It wasn't always this way. Years ago, he was different. Happily married, had a little girl. Then there was an accident. A drunk driver ran a red light, killed them both instantly, his wife Lillian and his daughter Olivia. She was only 6. The air in the small room grew heavy with the weight of the tragedy. Sophia thought of her own family, the fierce, protective love she felt for her mother and sister. The idea of losing them was a physical pain, a black hole that threatened to swallow her whole. The guy who did it, Brenda continued, her voice, low, had money-good lawyers. He got off with a slap on the wrist, community service, and a temporary license suspension. They said Blackwood changed after that. The man who went into that courthouse was never the man who came out. He became this. Hard, cold, and angry at the whole world, like he's trying to punish everyone for the injustice he suffered. So he comes here every week to, what, flex his misery on us? Sophia asked, a mix of pity and resentment churning within her. We think it's about control, Peterson said tiredly. He couldn't control the most important thing in his life. So now he controls everything else, down to the temperature of his soup and the exact shade of red in his steak. And we let him, because this restaurant needs his patronage. His weekly dinner, the functions he books here, they account for a significant portion of our revenue. So we walk on eggshells. We endure the humiliation. We cash the checks. That is the deal. He stood up and looked Sophia squarely in the eye. So I'm telling you this, not to scare you, though you should be scared. I'm telling you this as a warning. From now on, you do exactly as I said. No eye contact. No witty retorts. You are a machine. You deliver the food, you clear the plates, and you say nothing. Is that understood? Sophia nodded, but her mind was reeling. The story had changed things. He wasn't just a monster anymore. He was a man hollowed out by grief, lashing out from a place of unimaginable pain. It didn't excuse his behavior. The thought of what happened to Thomas the waiter made her stomach clench, but it complicated it. She left the locker room feeling like she was walking on a tightrope. On one side was her instinct for self-respect, her refusal to be treated like dirt. On the other was the very real, very frightening possibility of professional and personal ruin, not just for herself, but for her family who depended on her. When the impossibly expensive bottle of Petrus arrived from the cellar, cradled in a pristine white cloth, Sophia took it to his table. Her hands were trembling slightly as she presented the label to him. The 1982 Petrus, sir. She said, her voice, a carefully neutral monotone. He grunted his approval without looking at her. She expertly uncorked it, the soft pop echoing in the silent alcove. She poured a small amount into a glass for him to taste. He swirled it, sniffed it, and took a sip, holding the wine in his mouth for an unnervingly long time before swallowing. Acceptable, he finally declared. Sophia filled his glass to the proper level and was about to retreat when he spoke again, his voice low and sharp. Waitress. She stopped her back to him. Yes, sir. Your name, he commanded. Her heart pounded. Peterson's words screamed in her head. Your name is Waitress. She was supposed to be anonymous, a ghost. Giving him her name felt like giving him a target. It felt like handing him a weapon. She squeezed her eyes shut for a fraction of a second, the faces of her mother and sister flashing in her mind. She turned around slowly to face him. Her own grief, her own struggles, her own fierce need to keep her family safe rose up to meet his cold, empty gaze. She would not cower. She would be professional, but she would not be a ghost. "It's Sophia, sir," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Sophia Rossi. Alistair Blackwood stared at her, his expression unreadable. The icy blue of his eyes seeming to bore right through her. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, then turned his attention back to the window, dismissing her. As Sophia walked away, she felt a profound sense of dread. She had just broken the most important rule. She had given the shark her name, and now she could only wait for the bite. A week passed, a long, agonizing week where every ring of the phone made Sophia's stomach leap into her throat, expecting it to be Mr. Peterson, telling her not to come in. Every time her mother called to ask how the new job was, Sophia forced a bright, cheerful tone describing the chandeliers and the fancy food, omitting the part about the resident billionaire tyrant who might hold her family's fate in his hands. She was on edge, a taut wire of anxiety. The other staff treated her with a strange mix of pity and morbid curiosity, as if she were a lamb being led to a predictable slaughter. When Tuesday evening rolled around again, the atmosphere in the Gilded Spoon was thick enough to be carved with a fish knife. Sophia tried to busy herself with side tasks, hoping to be assigned to a different section anywhere else. But she knew it was a futile hope. At precisely 7:30 p.m., the Rolls-Royce glided to the curb. Gregory, the host, swallowed hard and approached Mr. Peterson. "He's here," Gregory announced, his voice funereal, and he had a request when he made the reservation. Peterson closed his eyes. "Don't tell me." He asked for the same table, Gregory continued, and the same waitress. He asked for Sophia Rossi by name. A collective silent gasp seemed to pass through the staff. This was it. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a summons, a deliberate, calculated move. Sophia felt her blood run cold. He hadn't forgotten her. He had fixated on her. Peterson walked over to Sophia, his face a mask of grim resignation. "It's you, Rossi. He asked for you. Remember what we talked about. Be a machine. No more clever remarks. Just do your job and get out." Nodding numbly, Sophia smoothed her apron with clammy hands. This felt different from last time. Last time was an accident. This was an appointment. As she walked towards table 7, she felt like she was walking a green mile. The whispers of her colleagues were gone, replaced by an unnerving, watchful silence. Blackwood was already seated, a glass of water in front of him, which was unusual. He typically started with scotch. He watched her approach, his pale eyes tracking her every step. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood," Sophia said, her voice impressively steady despite the frantic beating of her heart. She placed the menu on the table. "Rossi," he acknowledged, his tone flat. He didn't look at the menu. "I'll start with the seared scallops, but I want them seared for precisely 1 minute on each side. Use a stopwatch if you must. They are to be served on a bed of wilted spinach, but the spinach must not touch the scallops. A clear demarcation." Sophia meticulously wrote it down. "Yes, sir. And for your main course, I was considering the duck confit," he said, tapping a long finger on the table. "But I find the cherry sauce you serve it with to be pedestrian. Tell the chef I want an orange and star anise reduction instead. It should be tart, not sweet. If I taste more than a hint of sugar, it will be sent back." This was a direct challenge to Chef Antoine's authority and his menu. It was designed to be difficult to cause friction in the kitchen, to see if she would push back or relay the insulting demand. An orange and star anise reduction. Tart, not sweet. "Understood," Sophia said, calmly making a note. "And to drink water," he said. from a bottle, unopened. And I'll require 3 lemon wedges, not 2, not 4. 3. And a separate glass filled with ice. I will mix it myself. Every request was a small assertion of power, a deliberate complication of a simple process. It was a labyrinth of pointless specifications designed to make her trip up, to make her fail. Sophia met his gaze, held it for a beat, and then gave a slight professional nod. Of course, sir. I'll see to it immediately. She returned to the kitchen and relayed the orders. Antoine flew into a theatrical rage. Orange and star anise. Does he think this is a short-order diner? Does he want me to invent a new dish for him on the spot? And the scallops, a demarcation. Does he want me to build a little fence between them? He's testing me, Chef Sophia said quietly, her voice cutting through his tirade. Which means he's testing you. Please just do it. Perfectly. Antoine stared at her, then at the order slip. He let out a long, frustrated sigh. Fine. For you, Sophia. We will do it. We will build him his fence of spinach. The first test came with the water. Sophia returned with a chilled bottle of San Pellegrino, a bucket of ice, a highball glass filled with perfectly clear ice cubes, and a small plate bearing exactly 3 uniformly cut lemon wedges. She opened the bottle in front of him, placed everything on the table within his reach, and retreated without a word. He watched her a hawk observing its prey, but found no fault. Next, the scallops. When the plate came up from the kitchen, it was a work of art. The 3 large scallops were seared to a perfect golden brown. They sat on one side of the plate. On the other, a neat mound of vibrant green spinach wilted just so. A literal gap of white porcelain, a demarcation, separated them. Sophia carried it to the table with the steadiness of a surgeon. She placed it before him. Your seared scallops, sir. Blackwood stared down at the plate for a long time. He picked up his fork and nudged one of the scallops, checking its underside. He then took a small bite of the spinach. He chewed slowly, deliberately, his face an unreadable slate. He then cut a small piece from the scallop and ate it. Sophia stood perfectly still, holding her breath. He said nothing. He simply finished the scallops and the spinach, leaving the plate clean. It was neither a compliment nor a complaint. It was a void. The main course was the true crucible. The duck confit arrived, the skin impossibly crisp, and beside it, in a small silver sauce boat, was a dark, glistening reduction. Sophia placed it down. The duck confit with the orange and star anise reduction you requested. Blackwood picked up the sauce boat and poured a small amount onto the side of his plate. He dipped the tip of his fork in just a tiny drop and brought it to his lips. He closed his eyes. Sophia could see the muscles in his jaw working. The entire dining room seemed to be holding its breath with her. He opened his eyes and looked at the sauce, then at Sophia. It's adequate. From Alistair Blackwood, adequate was the highest form of praise. A wave of relief so profound washed over Sophia that she felt lightheaded. He proceeded to eat the entire meal meticulously, saucing each bite himself. He declined dessert, but ordered a coffee. Black, he commanded. And I want it brewed fresh. I don't want coffee that has been sitting on a burner. Sophia brought him a steaming cup brewed just moments before. He took a sip and set it down. The meal was over. The test, it seemed, was complete. The check, he said. His voice clipped. Sophia processed the bill and brought it back in the leather folio. He placed a black credit card inside without looking at the total. She took it, ran the transaction, and brought back the slip for him to sign. He scrawled an unreadable signature, stood up, and walked towards the exit without a backward glance. Sophia waited until he was gone before she dared to pick up the folio. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was beginning to fade. She opened it to retrieve the restaurant's copy of the slip. She glanced at the tip line. Her breath hitched. The bill was for several $1,000s, mostly due to the previous week's wine. On the tip line, where he usually left a standard, almost insultingly precise 20%, he had written in a new number. It was an amount nearly equal to the cost of the meal itself. It was more money than she made in 2 weeks. Beneath the signature, he had added 2 small, almost illegible words. For the trouble. Brenda and the other waiters rushed over, their curiosity finally boiling over. What happened? What did he do? Brenda asked, her eyes scanning Sophia as if looking for injuries. Sophia was speechless. She simply turned the slip around for them to see. There were gasps. I don't understand, whispered a young waiter named Paul. He never does that. Never. He left me a note once, Brenda said grimly. It said the salt shaker was insufficiently full. It made no sense. His behavior was deliberately antagonistic, designed to make her life hell. Yet the tip was extravagantly generous. It was a contradiction, a puzzle. He had put her through a gauntlet, tested her patience, her memory, her nerve, and her kitchen skill. She had met every challenge with unflappable competence, and in his own strange transactional way, he had rewarded her for it. Sophia pocketed her copy of the slip, the large number, a stark, confusing reality. It wasn't a victory. It felt more like she had survived a battle, emerging not with a trophy, but with a question. Who was this man who paid so handsomely for the privilege of being difficult? The warning from her colleagues had been about a monster. But this was more complicated. This was a man who, for some unknowable reason, was testing the world around him, and was willing to pay a premium for those who didn't break. The dread she had felt earlier was now replaced by a deep, unsettling curiosity. The massive tip became the new leading story in the folklore of the gilded spoon. Sophia was no longer the lamb for the slaughter. She was the dragon tamer. Her colleagues now treated her with a newfound respect tinged with awe. Mr. Peterson stopped looking at her with pity and started looking at her with a kind of baffled admiration. The victory, however, felt hollow to Sophia. The money was a godsend, immediately earmarked for a large chunk of her mother's overdue medical expenses, but the encounter had left her more unsettled than triumphant. It was like being praised by a storm for not being blown over. A new routine began to form. Every Tuesday, Alistair Blackwood would arrive at 7:30 p.m. He would ask for Sophia's section, and every week he would present a new series of bizarre and demanding tests. One week he insisted his water glass be replaced every time it was half empty. Another, he complained that the faint scent of lilies from the lobby's floral arrangement was interfering with the bouquet of his wine, forcing a flustered Gregory to have the entire massive vase removed. He sent back a lamb chop, claiming it was plated at an unappealing angle. Sophia met every challenge with the same stoic professionalism. She became an expert in anticipating his moods, in deciphering his cryptic complaints. She learned that the lighting is too aggressive meant he wanted the dimmer lowered by an almost imperceptible 5%. The ambient noise is distracting meant a family with loud children at the far end of the restaurant was bothering him. She handled each request without flinching a calm center in the whirlwind of his discontent. Their interactions remained clipped and formal. He called her Rossi. She called him Mr. Blackwood. He never smiled. He rarely made eye contact. But he always, at the end of the meal, left a tip that was wildly, almost absurdly generous. It became their unspoken contract. He would test her resilience, and she would monetize his misery. She was his designated lightning rod. The rest of the staff was spared his wrath, which now seemed to be focused entirely on her. They were grateful, and Sophia found a strange satisfaction in her role as the restaurant's shield. The money was life-changing. She was finally ahead of the bills. She'd bought her sister a new laptop for her college classes and had started a small savings account for her mother's future care. One Tuesday evening in late autumn, the restaurant was quieter than usual. A chill rain was streaking down the large windows, blurring the city lights into a watercolor painting. Blackwood was particularly silent, staring into the rain with a deep, brooding intensity. Sophia served him his usual filet mignon, cooked to his exacting specifications, and retreated to a discreet distance. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. It was her sister Maya. Sophia knew she shouldn't take personal calls during her shift, but a spike of anxiety shot through her. Maya rarely called her at work. Excusing herself to the relative privacy of a small alcove near the staff entrance, she answered her voice, a hushed whisper. "Maya, is everything okay? Is it Mom? She's okay, Fia." "She's fine." Maya's voice came through thick with emotion. "I mean, she's the same. That's the problem." Sophia heard her sister take a shaky breath. "I just got the estimate from the specialist. The new treatment they're recommending. Fia, we can't afford it. It's more than you make in a year. The insurance is calling it experimental and won't cover it." Sophia's heart sank. She leaned against the wall, the cool plaster a stark contrast to the heat of panic rising in her chest. "How much, Maya? $40,000, Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "And that's just for the first round. Fia, what are we going to do? Mom is so hopeful about this. It's the first time I've seen her excited about anything in months." Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back tears. She felt the weight of her family's hopes, their fears, their future, pressing down on her. The tips from Blackwood, as generous as they were a drop in the ocean compared to this. "Don't worry," Sophia said, forcing a strength she didn't feel into her voice. "We'll figure it out. We always do. I can pick up more shifts. Maybe I can take out a loan." The word sounded flimsy, even to her own ears. "A loan, Fia. Your credit is already stretched thin from her last surgery. Please don't ruin your future for this." "You and Mom are my future, Maya Sophia," said fiercely, her voice trembling with a mix of love and desperation. "I'll figure it out, I promise. Just don't tell Mom about the cost. Not yet. Let her have that hope for a little while." They said their goodbyes, and Sophia hung up her hand, shaking. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to compose herself before stepping back into the dining room. She had to be the calm, unflappable waitress. She couldn't afford to be the terrified daughter who was in over her head. She wiped a stray tear from her cheek and turned to leave the alcove, and froze. Alistair Blackwood was standing not 20 feet away, near the entrance to the restrooms. He wasn't looking at her, but she knew with a sudden gut-wrenching certainty that he had been there for the entire call. His back was to her, but his posture was rigid. He had heard everything: the hushed desperation, the cracking voice, the impossible number $40,000. Embarrassment and fear washed over her in a sickening wave. She had exposed her vulnerability, her desperation, to the one man who seemed to take pleasure in a world of perfect, emotionless control. She expected a reprimand, a sharp comment about conducting personal business on company time. He did nothing. He simply turned and walked back to his table, as if he hadn't seen or heard a thing. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of nerve-wracking tension for Sophia. He was even more silent than before. He finished his meal, paid the check with another enormous tip, and left without a word. Sophia cleaned his table, her mind racing. Had he heard? What would he do with that information? Would he use it against her somehow? The thought was terrifying. 2 days later, Sophia was at home on her day off, sorting through a mountain of medical paperwork, when she received a phone call from an unknown number with a prestigious downtown area code. "May I speak with Sophia Rossi?" A crisp, professional female voice asked. "This is she," Sophia answered cautiously. "Ms. Rossi, my name is Catherine Pierce. I'm a senior partner at the law firm of Pierce, Davies and Grant. I'm calling you regarding your mother's medical case." Sophia was bewildered. I'm sorry, I haven't contacted any law firm. I know Catherine Pierce," said her voice kind. "We were contacted by a third party, a benefactor who wishes to remain anonymous. This person has made us aware of your family's situation, specifically the denial of insurance coverage for a recommended treatment. Our firm specializes in challenging such denials, and in some cases exploring medical malpractice if initial care was substandard. The benefactor has arranged and paid for a full consultation for you and a complete review of your mother's case. Pro bono, of course. For you." Sophia sank into a chair, her head spinning. "A benefactor? Who, why?" "As I said, the party wishes to remain strictly anonymous," the lawyer replied smoothly. "Their only instruction was to provide you with the best possible legal assistance. We are very good at what we do, Miss Rossi. Can I schedule you for an appointment tomorrow morning?" Dumbfounded. Sophia agreed. She hung up the phone, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. An anonymous benefactor. A top-tier law firm. It made no sense. Who would do such a thing? The following Tuesday, Sophia approached Blackwood's table with a new sense of trepidation. She was armed with a secret she wasn't sure how to handle. She'd met with Catherine Pierce, a brilliant and compassionate lawyer, who, after a preliminary review, believed they had a very strong case against the insurance company, and possibly even a malpractice claim against one of her mother's previous doctors that they'd never even considered. A door had opened where there had only been a solid wall. She served Blackwood his meal with her usual quiet efficiency. As she was pouring his coffee at the end of the meal, her hands were steady, but her mind was screaming. Was it him? Could it possibly be him? It seemed insane. The cruel, demanding tyrant playing the part of a secret angel. As he was preparing to leave, she cleared his dessert plate. He paused, looking not at her, but at a point just past her shoulder. "In this world, Rossi," he said, his voice a low rumble. Completely out of the blue, the system is designed to crush the little guy. The paperwork is confusing for a reason. The rules are incomprehensible for a reason. He finally lifted his gaze to meet hers. His icy blue eyes held a depth she had never seen before. "When someone offers you good advice," he continued, his voice deliberate, "you'd be a fool not to take it." And with that, he stood, dropped his napkin on the table, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sophia standing in his wake, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was him. There was no other explanation. The timing, the comment. Alistair Blackwood, the monster of the gilded spoon, the man who ruined lives over cold soup, had just given her family a lifeline. The glimmer of humanity she had just witnessed wasn't a glimmer. It was a blinding flash of light, illuminating the dark, complex, and utterly baffling mystery of the man at Table 7. The revelation that Alistair Blackwood was her anonymous benefactor shattered Sophia's perception of him. The cruel, demanding tyrant was also a secret angel of mercy. The contradiction was too profound to ignore. Consumed by a need to understand the man behind the mask, Sophia dedicated her off hours to a new mission, uncovering the real Alistair Blackwood. Her investigation began at her small kitchen table, the glow of her sister's laptop her only light. The initial search results yielded the familiar public narrative glowing profiles in business journals celebrating his ruthless acumen, followed by invasive tabloid stories that painted him as a bitter, reclusive figure haunted by his past. They all told the same superficial story of a man turned to stone by grief. Sophia knew there was more. She dug deeper, pushing past the first 10 pages of search results, using more specific keywords like victims' rights and pro bono terms she'd learned from her meeting with Catherine Pierce. Her breakthrough came from an obscure legal blog post from over a decade ago. It lamented the legislative failure of a proposed bill called the Olivia Lillian Bill, which aimed to introduce harsher sentences for drunk drivers. The names were a punch to the gut, his daughter and his wife. The article mentioned in passing that the small advocacy group behind the bill had been quietly funded by an anonymous donor. This clue was the key. Using the advocacy group's name, Sophia unlocked a hidden history. A pattern emerged, a trail of breadcrumbs leading through years of quiet, unpublicized philanthropy. She found records of a massive grant to a non-profit that provided free legal counsel to families fighting powerful insurance companies. She discovered an endowed scholarship at a university for aspiring public defenders. In every case, the funding came from a mysterious, anonymous source. It was all him. Sophia leaned back, stunned. Blackwood wasn't just a man lashing out at the world. He was waging a secret one-man war against the very brand of systemic injustice that had shattered his own life. His obsession with control at the restaurant suddenly made perfect, tragic sense. It wasn't the petulance of a rich man. It was a profound trauma response. Having lost control over the most important moment of his life, he coped by micromanaging the one tiny corner of the world he could. His dinner. The temperature of his soup, the angle of his lamb chop, they were desperate attempts to impose order on a universe that had shown him only chaos. His rudeness was a fortress built to keep people at a distance, ensuring he could never lose anyone again. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when she found an old society column from before the accident. It featured a photo of a much younger, smiling Alistair Blackwood at a charity gala. His wife Lillian was radiant on his arm, and holding his hand was a little girl with a missing front tooth, Olivia. The caption noted their support for a children's literacy program. He hadn't always been a monster. He had been a husband, a father, a happy man. Seeing that photo, Sophia felt an ache of sympathy that eclipsed all her previous fear. Armed with this devastating, humanizing truth, Sophia knew her next encounter with him couldn't be the same. She had to acknowledge the man he truly was, not the character he played. That Tuesday she approached his table with a newfound sense of purpose. He began his typical litany of difficult requests, but Sophia heard them differently now, not as malice, but as a scripted ritual of pain. When she brought him his custom-blended tea, she waited for a lull in the dining room's chatter. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice soft but clear, causing him to look up in surprise at this break in their protocol. "I was doing some reading the other day about legal advocacy groups, the ones that help families fight for victims' rights." A deep stillness came over him. His hands, which had been resting on the table, froze. He was listening intently. "I was just so struck by it," Sophia continued, holding his gaze. "The idea that there are people out there, working behind the scenes, fighting for strangers they've never even met. They don't do it for recognition. They just see an injustice and try to make it right." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the air between them. "I just think it's an amazing thing what some people do to fight for others, especially when no one is watching." The silence that followed was profound, filled with unspoken meaning. The fortress around Alistair Blackwood showed a crack. For the first time, he wasn't appraising her or testing her. He was truly seeing her. He saw the person who had looked past his monstrous facade and acknowledged the wounded man behind it. He cleared his throat, a rough, gravelly sound, and picked up his menu, though he didn't read it. "The scallops," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I think I'll have the seared scallops tonight." exactly as the chef prepares them. It was a concession, a white flag. The tests were over. Sophia simply nodded, a small, knowing smile on her lips. She had found the truth, and by sharing it so subtly, she had opened the door for the real Alistair Blackwood to walk through. The truce declared over the scallops marked a profound shift. Alistair Blackwood's weekly visits transformed from tense trials into quiet, respectful rituals. The bizarre, exacting demands ceased. He began asking Sophia's opinion on wine pairings, and to the astonishment of the staff would actually take her recommendation. Their dynamic had settled into a comfortable peace, humming with the unspoken knowledge of his secret kindness. The true turning point came when Catherine Pierce's law firm secured a life-altering victory against the insurance company. With her mother's future care guaranteed, Sophia felt an overwhelming gratitude that she could no longer contain. That Tuesday evening, as the restaurant began to empty, she knew she had to break their silent pact. She approached his table with purpose. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice steady. He looked up from the window, a flicker of understanding in his pale eyes. "Sophia, I suspect you have more to say than asking if I'd like a refill." "I do," she said, taking a breath. "I know it was you." He didn't feign ignorance. "Your lawyer is very good. I trust the outcome was satisfactory." "It changed my family's life," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave my mother a future. I don't have the words to thank you." "No thanks are necessary," he said quietly. "The system failed you. I simply provided a tool to level the playing field." "It's more than that," she insisted gently. "I did some research. The Olivia, Lillian, Bill, the scholarships, the other families. I know the monster everyone fears is just a mask." A shadow of his old pain crossed his face. "That reputation keeps the world at arm's length. After I lost my family, the world became noise. Controlling things here was the only way to make it stop, a pathetic substitute for the control I'd lost." "I see the man who endured that," Sophia replied, her voice soft with empathy. "And the same man saved my mother." For the first time, a genuine, if small, smile touched Alistair's lips. "You were the first person in a decade who wasn't afraid. You didn't see a monster. You saw a rude customer and stood your ground." He paused, his expression turning serious. "I have a proposition. All those anonymous charities need someone to run them. Someone with integrity and courage. I'm establishing the Blackwood Foundation, and I want you to be its executive director." Sophia was stunned into silence. He was offering her a new life, a path she had never dreamed of, a chance to help others, just as she had been helped. She looked around the elegant dining room, the stage for her fear and her triumph, and knew her time here was over. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "I accept." It was not a fairy tale ending, but a new beginning. He was taking a first step out of the shadows, and she was starting a career she couldn't have imagined. The waitress who refused to back down hadn't just earned his respect. She had given him a reason to re-engage with the world. The story of Sophia and Alistair isn't just about a waitress and a billionaire. It's a powerful reminder that the people we dismiss as monsters are often just individuals fighting battles we know nothing about. It shows that courage isn't about the absence of fear, but about standing firm in spite of it. One act of defiance, one refusal to be diminished, set in motion a chain of events that uncovered a hidden truth and healed two very different lives. Their journey teaches us that empathy is a superpower, and that looking past the surface to truly see the person within can change not only their world, but also our own. If this story of unexpected connection and hidden kindness moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that challenge our perceptions and warm our hearts. Your support helps us continue to find and tell these incredible tales.